Mad Max Fury Road is one of my favorite movies of all time. I saw it a couple times in the theaters. I've seen it multiple times since. I wasn't really excited for Furiosa. It was 10 years after Fury Road, and I'm just not that big on prequels. I already know where Furiosa ends up. I already pretty much kind of know her story of like where she came from. I don't love prequels because I feel like they try to put the main character in harm's way and act like there's a chance that they could die, but I've already seen the movie after it, so I know that they don't die. I know they live, I know what happened, so I'm not really big on prequels. Furiosa proved me wrong. I wasn't excited for this movie, and I loved it. I don't think it's perfect. I don't think it's as great as Mad Max Fury Road. I think it could have about 15 to 20 minutes shaved off. I think the Furiosa character was really just like deep and rich, and the story, this movie proved me wrong about prequels. Usually I'm a hater of prequels. Usually I'm not that interested in them. I love this movie. I loved seeing Furiosa's story with her coming up. I love the glimpse we see of the Green Place. Ayla Brown, who played the younger Furiosa, did a great job. Anya Taylor-Joy surprisingly didn't come in till about like an hour through into the movie. Chris Hemsworth, I thought was so funny and so good as Dementis. Something that I feel like not many people have talked about this movie is just how funny it is. To me, this is the funniest movie of the year so far. Mad Max, George Miller, his style of comedy just really speaks to me because his movies are like much like darker and dramatic, but they'll just have ridiculous things about them. Like there's never any jokes with him or in Joe. He's a pretty serious character for the most part and a pretty like dark, intimidating character. But if you just look at him, he's wearing plastic abs and plastic pecs. He's wearing fake muscles, which is just so funny. His son's name are Rictus and Scrotus. Erectus. There was so much about this movie that even like days later, the main one days later, I couldn't stop thinking about, couldn't stop laughing about, was the scene where Dementis gets his nipples ripped off. I don't know why that had to happen. I need to rewatch the movie. I'm not sure why he had his nipples clamped to that vice, why his nipples had to get ripped off, but I couldn't stop thinking about that scene. And it wasn't played like it was supposed to be one big like comedic gag. Like nothing in this movie is like set up for a punchline type joke like a regular comedy. There's just really ridiculous things happening. Like for example, the Mentis gets hit with that red flare, and he's covered in red paint, and then he calls himself the Red Dementis. Like a year later passes by, and it looks like he hasn't taken a bath because he's still covered in the red paint. Little things like that I found so funny. The way he kept changing his name, the Red Dementis, the Dark Dementis, I thought was so funny. His idea of taking the Citadel when he goes in there and he's like, "Give me your leaders." I thought it was such a good speech, and I was like, wow, this is going to work. And then like 5 minutes later, he's running out of there and it completely backfires. Stuff like that I thought was so funny. The CGI in the movie, I've seen a lot of people complain about the CGI. It was weaker than Fury Road, but at the same time, there was some CGI in the movie that was incredible. I didn't think it was as horrible as people said. I need to rewatch it, but I just remember there weren't any scenes that like stuck out to me where it was like, whoa, that is bad. There were definitely scenes that stuck out to me where I was like, I could tell it was CGI, but it wasn't like a blurry, when you watch like a Marvel movie or when you watch the most recent American Godzilla movies where it looks like a weird blurry video game, there was no scenes that looked like that to me, so I didn't really hate the CGI in there, and I thought the practical effects looked incredible. I think George Miller started like sort of a renaissance of doing these car action scenes and these chase scenes when he did Fury Road. After Fury Road, so many blockbusters were trying to do their version of the Mad Max chase scene. Even indie movies, if you remember that movie, I forget what it was called, but I think it had Brad Pitt in it. I think it was an A24 movie on the moon. I'll look it up and put it in here. That had like a very similar kind of copying Mad Max style moon car chase scene. And all these movies that were inspired by the chase scenes in Mad Max Fury Road and tried to do their own version or tried to do better versions of it never came close until George Miller came back to the director's chair and did Furiosa. And he has scenes that are just on par, maybe even could be better than some of the chase scenes in Furiosa. Dementis' motorcycle chariot setup was so funny. I think that character was just so, like, he took himself very seriously, but everything about him was just so ridiculous and just a very, very comedic character, but also a really, like, fucked up, messed up character. Furiosa's whole story was so tragic, but so good. I love seeing it. I love seeing this as a prequel. My only complaint, I really like how the movie was split into 5 chapters. I think the 5th chapter went on a little bit too long. I don't really like in movies when two characters finally have to face off. In this scene, it's Furiosa and Dementis. Their dialogue kind of like went on a little bit too long. I was like, okay, you guys don't need the cheesy 10-minute speeches back and forth about why you did what you did and everything. It just came across a little bit cheesy. I would have preferred it to be a little bit quicker, a little bit less like melodramatic. Like Dementis gets his spiel about his whole backstory and fills us in on his story, and Furiosa gets her spiel. I would have liked something quicker, something a little bit less like cliche and over dramatized. I really, really love the way that George Miller did the 40-Day War, if that's what it was called. I feel like any other movie, any other blockbuster would have used that 40-Day War as their big climactic finale, but George Miller did it in like 2 minutes, just showing us kind of like a time-lapse thing of it, and I thought that was really creative, really cool, something that nobody else would have done, and it was something that like took balls, and this is why George Miller is creating these blockbusters that are different than all the other blockbusters that studios are giving you. These big action movies that George Miller is making are things that other movies are going to copy years from now. And I really love Furiosa. I thought it was a perfect companion piece to Fury Road. You could watch Furiosa and then go in and watch Fury Road, and I think they'll work perfectly together. I love how dark and kind of graphic and violent this movie is, and it's very messed up. I just think it could have been about 15 to 20 minutes shorter, especially in that final, like, fourth and fifth chapter. The thing is, there's so many blockbusters nowadays that I look at them. Like, for example, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, a movie I liked, but I feel like there weren't any, like, iconic or memorable shots that you're going to remember. There was nothing that was, like, overly unique about that film. Whereas George Miller is doing unique stuff that no one else is doing, and people are going to copy him in the future. If I were to give Furiosa a grade, I would give it an 8 out of 10. Peace.